Welcome to the Survival Prepper Show, where being labeled a crazy prepper is a badge of honor. Learn about disaster preparedness, survival, and get ready for whatever challenges might come your way. This is not your typical prepping podcast, and they won't be silenced by the censors. Here are your hosts, Duff and Dale.
Hey there, everyone. Welcome to the show. Tonight, we're going to... Jammer in the chat had said, what's up with the restream? And tonight, we're all over the place. We're doing this on Rumble. We're doing this on Survivalist Prepper. We're doing this on Survival Preppers. We're doing it on Facebook, on Twitter. So that's what's up with the restream. That way, we can send this show out to all those different places. It's been a while since we've done a show on Survivalist Prepper, so I wanted to do that. But every show we do, we're doing Twitter and we're doing Rumble as well. So this week we just added a couple more. We don't usually do Facebook because sometimes we get too much into some stuff that is not so Facebook friendly. Anything that's rated above G anymore is not Facebook friendly. So, but that's the reason for that. Tonight we are going to stick. We're going to stick to a lot of prepping stuff though, because we are on Facebook and Survivalist Prepper and all that stuff though. So, at any rate, Brian, how you doing? I know you're kind of coming out of the doldrums with your cold, but not quite yet.
Yeah, man, I've been I don't know. I guess the flu for almost about a week now. So it's getting there. A lot better than it was, but it's still, it's the flu.
Yeah. Hey, and Vision's in the chat. Hudson Valley's in the chat. What's up, guys?
Hey, what's
and
up, guys?
The usual suspects. But before we get into that tonight, I haven't told everybody over at Survivalist Prepper yet, but I do have T-shirts on sale over at the SHTF shop. I've got a few designs so far, and I've got some ideas for some more as well. So if you're interested in something like that, Christmas gifts, or even just something for yourself, those are on sale now. Plus, I'll have some designs here in the future. I got the Protect Your Nuts. My menacing squirrel is what I call him. We've got our since 1984 because that's the world we live in right now. And then the shirt I'm wearing right now is the head in the sand, which is a pretty good one too. In the future, I plan on it. I want to get it set up to where, say, if somebody wants a hoodie, I think it was Pat in the chat a couple weeks ago said that he wanted me to do hoodies or long sleeve shirts or something like that. And I think what I'm going to do is try to set up a contact form or something where somebody can go to Amazon and say, hey, this is the shirt I want. I'll order the shirt, charge it like a $10 art fee, and then I'll make the shirt up for you and send it out. That way I don't have to, I just can't afford to stock 15 different sizes of 500 different shirts. My house isn't that big, so I got to figure out something for that. But if somebody is interested in that, say you do want a hoodie with a chest patch or something on it, email me, let me know what kind of shirt you're looking at, and I can set up a product and get that all set up. But it's just starting out, but there'll be a lot more in the future over at the SHTFshop.com, which you can go to SHTF shop or the SHTF shop because I bought the other domain now. So the SHTF shop will redirect you over to the SHTF shop. At any rate, enough of that. We also have Legacy Food Storage over there. So if you're looking into Legacy Food Storage, hit me up and I can get you a really good deal on all of that stuff. At any rate, like I said, we're going to talk about a lot of prepping stuff tonight. And I was thinking about this the other day, is like how, and we've talked about this a little bit a couple of times, how prepping has changed over time and how we've changed as preppers. And I wanted to talk about, some of that stuff. But as I was looking through this stuff, I found a couple articles, and I know I'll bet you even have one. The whole Jeff Foxworthy thing. You're a prepper if have you written one of those articles?
Yeah. Have I written one? I don't think I have.
Okay. Well,
but there's a bunch of them out there.
Yeah, they're everywhere. I got a couple here. I just want to go through a couple of these. They've got a lot on there. This one from Food Storage Moms. It's got 50 signs you might be a prepper. And I think a lot of these, we go through these and we're like, no, but most of them were like, yeah, that's me. And it's weird how our brains have kind of evolved, since we've kind of become preppers, how we think differently. I'll just go through a couple of these here, and if you have any thoughts on them, just let me know. But when bad weather arrives for some reason, You're super excited about it. I think that one, to me anyway, is one of those things that as preppers, when the power goes out, it almost is that a little bit of an excitement, right? That little bit of, ooh, I get to pull out my supplies. But it's also that double-edged sword.
Yeah, I know, man. I was in Virginia a little while ago, and they when I was driving in, they had tornado warnings, right? And I'm thinking, I'm in my truck. I wasn't too excited about that. I was like, and what do? You know, like, okay, I pull over and get under an underpass and hope it doesn't fling me and my truck around the road and kill me. I'm not sure. The power outage I can see. If you know it's gonna be a temporary power outage, yeah.
Yeah, there's I think it's two different things. When you're out in it, like a snowstorm or something like that, when you're out in it, as opposed to when you're at home, two totally different things. Because if I'm in my truck and it starts just like white out snowing or blizzarding and stuff like that, that is scarier than hell. But at home, you're like, all right, hunker down, time to get this done.
Yeah.
The next one I think is something that we all kind of think about ourselves, and we've talked about this a few times, but you're strangely curious about what an EMP event would actually look like. And I think this is not that I want it to happen, but I think that's totally true because there's so much guesswork involved with all this stuff. Even government agencies they have it figured out, but they don't have it figured out. We've got, tests that Starfish Prime and stuff like that have been done, but we just don't really know. So it would be kind of maybe in a different country, right? Have an EMP go off in a different
I imagine
country.
they know a lot more than they let on, though, because with the advent of drone technology, I bet they're working on a lot of EMP type stuff to be able to take out drones or be able to make sure that their technology is protected. So I think you're going to see a lot of progress in that down the road. Not that they'll let it out to us, probably use it against us, but whatever.
Yeah. And that makes a lot of sense, you would think, because of all the drone technology, all the electronics and robots and all that stuff. That would be the ultimate deterrent against that stuff, is just shut it down, the sci-fi kind of thing.
Yeah.
A couple more here and then we'll move on. I'm trying to see here. You start to panic when you're down to your last family pack of toilet paper. I don't ever get down that far. It doesn't get to that point. This is kind of interesting because this is most of us. When you hear something on the news, your first instinct is to not believe it. Which is, I
don't know, man. I mean, I think like nowadays, I don't even think you have to be a prepper to not believe what you hear. Like, I mean, I don't think I believe anything I hear on the news anymore, or whatever. Why do we call it the news still? What I don't know what it is now. Mainstream media. How's that? Because it's not news. So the propaganda channel or something. So I don't believe any of it. Actually, I believe the opposite of it now. So maybe that makes it a little bit easier.
Yeah. That's crazy because you think about it like the way we should do it is go to social media, you see or read something, then you go to the news to find out the validity or the accuracy, right? These days, it's the complete opposite. You watch the news and they're spinning the story like crazy. So then you go to social media and find out, what the real story is or the other sides to that story.
Would you see CBS just they went through and did a bunch of testing and stuff and verification processes, and they just verified that Benedict Arnold was in fact a traitor. Big breaking story. Yeah.
Good for them. At least they're doing that hard hitting stuff,
Yeah.
Yeah.
No laptop for him though. He didn't have a laptop. Old letters.
Yeah. A couple more. 911 is not part of your 911 is not part of your home security plan. That's absolutely that's prepping in a nutshell right there. Because if you're prepping is about not having to depend on outside resources. So that's prepping 101 right there. Is not, if they can help, if times are good enough, they can help. That's great. But if not,
Yeah, I think 911 should, again, I think you should dial that right. Fire department show up, they do a good job typically. As bad a rap as cops get, typically they usually do a good job dealing with your stuff. So I would hit 911, but yeah, I wouldn't rely on them to be there. We've talked about it doesn't have the downfall of society doesn't have to escalate very far to get it to the point where 911 is not going to help you out much.
Yeah, no kidding. Last one on here. When it comes to being prepared, your dog is more prepared than your next door neighbor. And that is, you know what? That is well, I don't, we don't know all of our neighbors and all that stuff, but I guarantee you, my dog is going to be healthy and fed a lot longer than most of my neighbors. I just put it that way.
That's how in the apocalypse, they'll tell if you have a bunch of stuff packed away, they'll come up, your dog's all looking fat and happy, waddling around the yard. And they're like, his dog's not even skinny. Well, why haven't they eaten their dog yet? And it's going to be, you must have stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. That reminds me of one too. And I've heard this before, but I think we're going to talk about later in how our brains have changed as far as, since we became preppers, how we think about different things. But it is interesting because we do, and we've talked about Lisa's horses a few times, but it is that kind of inside joke that's a joke, but maybe not really in a hardcore SHTF situation. We do look at our pets and go,
I mean, my pet's a family, pets are, to me, my pet's a family member pretty much. And look at the Donner Party. They ate each other. So when people say I would never do that, I agree with you. And I wonder if any of the Donners looked at one of their family members or one of the people they were in the wagons with and said, yeah, I'll eat them if things get bad enough.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, I love my dog, my big dog. And it would take a whole lot for me to get to that point. And I don't even know that I could get to that point, but you just never know. Yeah.
I saw in the, in Facebook, they have an admins group for a bunch of where the administrators of a lot of the big Facebook groups or any Facebook group really gets in there. And whenever they have someone raising heck in one of their groups, a lot of times they'll post it. And they had a guy in there recently and, he was like, I'm not going to worry about my stuff. I'm just going to go I'm going to become a marauder, And so I think it's, people say a lot of stuff, but I don't know. I think having your pets are family members. I don't know. When it comes to like Lisa's horses, I guess those are like her. How much does a horse weigh? 1,000 pound pets.
Yeah, pretty close. Something like that. 500, 600, 700, somewhere in that range. Hers probably 1,000. Frisbee is he's fat. He's huge.
Yeah.
But yeah, that would be a Lisa decision too. And no way I'm making that decision because
that's why you're a prepper, right? That's why you have years worth of food stock. You try to have years worth of food stocked up. Like, so you never have to get to that point of having to go, what am I going to do? That's the whole point of what we're talking about, preparedness, right? Like never want to get to that point.
Well, and they're going to take a lot of food and stuff. I think I'll bet you Lisa would, if it ever got to that point, if I ever brought that up, like, hey, what do you think about this or something? She'd probably let him go just to get him so I couldn't get to him.
Yeah.
So it's just interesting. People are going to do crazy stuff if things get that bad. People start to do crazy stuff, and it's that never say never thing, I guess. I mean, I don't see myself ever. That would be tough. But like you said, the Donner Party did it, and I guarantee you they weren't, like crazy freak cannibals before they took off on their little adventure.
Oh, they were freak cannibals. They just never gotten to the point where they decided to act on it yet.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, maybe.
Well, I mean, I think that gets back to the whole problem. The one thing with preparedness that you can guarantee is the unpredictable nature of a disaster event, something bad happening, right? You can't do your preps to hopefully make it as predictable as possible. But at the end of the day, you can't predict everything that's going to come down the road.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, Milo in the chat said, I don't look at my dog. I know I feed him first because he provides me with so much. Early warning system, for example. Yeah, you've got the companionship, and when and it's in a situation like that when your morale is going to probably suck, and everything's just going bad. Dogs, they just love you no matter what, man. Just as long as you're around. And then that early warning system absolutely is super beneficial, especially in a situation like that. We've talked about this before when we were talking about home security and stuff. Right now, it's annoying when my dogs bark at 2:00 in the morning. But in a situation like that, I'm going to be damn glad they are. So, they're going to be more beneficial than a lot of people in an SHTF situation. So, At any rate, I wanted to kind of talk a little bit, move on from this. I wanted to talk a little bit how the way we think about things has changed ever since we got into preparedness. The things we think about with food, with water, with the OPSEC. I'm sure your military background probably had something to do with the way your thought process changed throughout your life, and it kind of fit in with prepping. But there's a lot of things that as we kind of think, I look back to like 20 years ago, and the way I think about things now, even if it's just driving somewhere and you're looking at alternative routes, or you're looking, you're looking at for those things that could become problems for you. You're looking at all that stuff because of the things that we talk about and we learn and we do in prepping and everything. So it's pretty interesting. Just to think about how, that it's almost hard these days to think about how a normal person, a quote unquote normal person, would think about this stuff. But what are your thoughts on all of that as far as, well, first off, with the OPSEC and all of that stuff, was it something that you thought about as far as before your military stuff? And then was it the military stuff and you just kind of brought it into prepping, or did it, how did that all evolve basically?
Oh, I think it started off with having a crazy mom as a kid, right? So you always wanted to watch what you said around her, because you never know when she's going to go wacko on you. Then two, when I went off and I started doing EMS at 18, you go deal with a bunch of messed up people. I was like, I didn't want to be the guy that comes home and I don't want to have to talk about it afterwards. Like, oh, you should have seen this horrible thing. Like the funny stuff, but like, the tragedy and when people were really messed up. And then you get when I got in the Ranger Battalion, like, it was a pretty serious thing. So you just didn't talk about it, right? Like I'm going to do something. And that's ends up being kind of like your whole way of life. It kind of screws you up in a way, because you end up being a cagey, shady person all the time. You just get into this thing of just always touching things superficially and not really saying much about it. So yeah, I think it 100% affected stuff. Yeah.
Kind of on that, I suppose it would make you kind of calloused. We were talking about this over Christmas with Lisa's son, my daughter doing some EMT stuff, and taking some extra classes, and Lisa being the RN, and talking about how I just couldn't handle that stuff. And it's not the blood and guts, but it is that people getting massively hurt, and that the emotional aspect of it. But I suppose you get jaded to the whole situation eventually, to where it becomes almost like I don't know if it's healthy or not, but almost like you separate yourself from the situation. And, you kind of have to, I suppose, when you're dealing with, say, somebody, especially if it's a child or something like that, gets in a car accident when you're an EMT or something, and you have to deal with that you're that first responder type thing. I just don't know how, and Lisa doing the things she does at work, some of the crap she looks at, I just don't see how a lot of people can do that. But I suppose it is something you just kind of get callous to, right?
Well, I think some people get callous to it and they just go on, and they go through life. I think a lot of people, EMS and stuff like that, especially in really high volume places, like when I was working in Los Angeles, there were times at different stations I worked at where we ran 25 to 30 calls a shift. And then when I worked in rural areas, you might run 2 or 3 calls, but then you're with patients for a lot longer, depending on where you're at. So it kind of all adds up. And I think people get callous to it, and they use the graveside humor or gallows humor, they call it, for a while. But eventually I notice now that more and more of my friends who are in those fields and have done careers in that and similar things, in their 40s and 50s, they start having a lot of issues with post-traumatic stress. And it's terrible what we have right now. It was one of the things I saw when all the lockdowns were going on. There was I think it was up in like Wisconsin or something like that, Minnesota. And this town was like, look, we have so many people out with COVID, or we can't do this and that we're doing this really great thing. They had like a bunch of 16-year-olds driving ambulances. Right. And I think like the paramedics and the EMTs work in the back, and these kids were all proud, and they should be. But the system does nothing. Very few jurisdictions do anything to prepare those people for what they're going to see and what they're going to deal with, and the stress of what they're going to have to deal with. So I look at it as, I haven't made any secrets about with my post-traumatic stress struggles. Right. And so I look at it, I'm like, oh my gosh, here's a 16-year-old kid that's going to see more in the next 2 years, and there's nothing there for them to work on. And it's actually an industry that a lot of it still is, don't say anything about it, because part of the whole thing with that is, right, oh, someone saw something worse, so you don't think that you should be affected because someone dealt with something worse. You don't know how they're dealing with it. So I think it's one of the things that we fail at as a society is not, I just saw something, I want to say it's Brazil. Like it was Brazil. They just signed in and like Congress signed a law in for like providing massive help for EMS and law enforcement, public safety and everything from the jump, from the get-go when they get into it. Start teaching them, hey, this is how the brain works. This is what you're going to experience. When you start feeling like this is what's happening and why, and here's how you work on it. But our society now is, let's get you onto the ambulance or get you into the car as fast as we can. I mean, we talk about cops, right? What happens with law enforcement? Years ago, you always had 2 cops in a car. I think it's one of the problems where cops overreact now is a cop's on his own all day or on her own most of the day. Yeah. Dealing with some really, really hard stuff. And so, it's like, I think we just do a really poor job on that. And it sets us up for all this stuff.
Yeah. Well, and you think about in some sort of large scale disaster type situation, massive, something long term that really wreaks havoc on society in general. People are going to see a lot of that stuff, and you're going to have all those different reactions. Like you said, there's going to be that PTSD. You don't know how one person's reacting to it or going to, as opposed to another person. And some people will internalize it until it blows up. Some people, it may not affect them at all. Some people, I mean, it's different for everybody. And I think in a situation like that, you're going to see a lot more, I guess, situations that present itself, that the opportunity for that, even just the earthquake itself or the natural disaster itself or the event itself could be that post-traumatic stress. A car accident could lead to that post-traumatic stress, not to the extent of, like going overseas and being involved with it for years. But that I think you can have complex trauma and stuff like that happens from buildup. But that's where one of the fallacies that we have, where people say, it was just a car wreck I was in. Anytime you have this thing where you're fearing for your life, it affects people differently. Kevin in the chat, Broken Nomad, says some places are getting better at providing critical incident stress management services for members. Every day, that's part of the problem. We have a team that comes around if you have a really bad incident. Every day, those crews are being subjected to really bad incidents. Anytime you're flying through a city, you're always going to have stuff where you have somebody that their life's in your hands and it's going south. Like, you're going to have problems with that. Every day they go to work is a critical incident stress management situation for those people. And so we cherry pick these really bad incidents, but they have years of piling on all this other stuff where, when you go through your EMT training, they really don't talk about that stuff. At least when I went through EMT training, when I went to paramedic school back in the 80s, they didn't talk about it. I don't think they're really talking much about it now. It deserves a lot of education. Same thing with the military. When you go to basic training, you get taught how to, disassemble, reassemble your rifle. You get all the basic soldier skills and all that, but they never teach you about your head. They're going to take you, right? Pick you up, take you overseas and drop you into combat. Say, hey, you're going on a 15-month deployment, go through all the stuff. And then when they come back, like, they have you meet with a shrink once. Some of that stuff comes on later. They need to do it ahead of time. If you educate people ahead of time about it, they know they will be much better at knowing when they need help and be able to go get the help that they need. Yeah. Yeah. The problem with all of that, though, is it's usually kind of like everything in our society. It's only when it becomes too late or it becomes an issue that can't be ignored anymore that it becomes something that they work on and they try to fix. Kind of the same thing with the way society is in these shootings and stuff that are going on. The mental health issues that could be addressed, but nobody does anything until it becomes a big issue, until it has to be addressed, until it's right in front of their face.
We talked about it last week, right? You think about the 2 shootings they had, the one up in Colorado at the Club Q, and then the one at the Walmart that they just had. And when you read through that, like, both of those people had huge mental health issues. Everybody asks, well, what's the difference? Why are shootings going up? Because our mental health is getting worse in this country. We're not doing anything about it. Mm-hmm. We had school shootings back. I mean, there was some back I remember a big one that was back in the 60s. We've had school shootings, but nothing like we have now. And you look at every one of these cases, and they're either someone with like the shooting that was down in Florida a while back, that was I think a Muslim guy that wanted to go do whatever. But then you have all these shootings seem that the tie-in is the person's whacked out of their head. You look at that kid that shot the Colorado school up. His dad was a Fruit Loop. His mom was busted for arson. Like this dude was a mess. He should have gotten help, but they didn't. He did a bomb threat a year ago. On live streamed a bomb threat and had the cops trying to make entry on him, and just, hey, go walk around. That dude needed all kinds of help.
Yeah. And that was pretty obvious, yet it wasn't a big enough issue that they felt like they needed to address it. Yeah. Hey, Milo put in the chat, I'm curious your thoughts because I have no idea on this, but in an SHTF event, are there situations where PTSD might help your situation?
Yeah.
And I suppose, it perks your
100%.
Alertness up, right?
If I were to go back into working overseas again, while I'm overseas, I don't have post-traumatic stress. I mean, I do, but everything that comes with post-traumatic stress, heightened awareness, being on edge. And part of the problem with post-traumatic stress when you're in the States is my brain analyzes everything that's happening around me. It never stops. Right. So after a while, it starts getting agitated. Well, overseas, there's a reason for that. Here in the States, it's like, oh, nothing's happening. What's going on? This is weird. Right. And you start having, and then all the others just overseas, people are on edge. So you have the gallows humor. You have people that it's more of that rough sense of humor. You tell people to F off, and all the stuff. So, I got buddies that have been working overseas now. I mean, they're going on 20 years of contracting after they got out of the military. So it works in a lot of ways when you're overseas. But when you have to come back to reality is when you start having problems. And that's not to say when I was running the security program in Baghdad, when I was the stateside program manager for that, the day I went to the hospital for the time when a doc finally said, hey, have you had your head examined? That day, one of my guys overseas ate a gun. So, it does affect you over there as well. But it's a lot of the things that it does. It kind of rewards it in a way. It's like, okay, this all works. It's all working. So, but again, it's still, talking about buddies that I have that have been overseas for 20 years. No one offers them any mental health. They come home and it's like, hey, take off, go into society, hang out.
Yeah.
So
typical. That's the way we treated the military for forever. Yeah.
There's no money in the cure, right? We talk about that all the time.
Yep. You're used up. We don't need you anymore. Go away until, don't bother us until you have to. Mm-hmm. That's interesting to think about though, because I suppose it makes a lot of sense because there's a reason that you get PTSD, and that is because your body feels like it needs to be super alert about all this stuff. So in an SHTF situation, long-term type event, it really would be beneficial. Now it doesn't mean that I don't suppose that means it's good for you in the long term.
No,
but it would be
like eventually it gets to the point where, if it keeps getting bad enough, if you don't get treatment, it gets to the point where you're looking down the end of a gun.
Yeah.
It just, cause you're agitated all the time because your body your subconscious it can't talk to you. Your subconscious works, that sixth sense that we have, the hair standing up in the back of our neck. That's our subconscious. It works 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. It's on. It's stronger than our brain. We go to sleep. When we're asleep, the thing that's going, hey, what do I hear a sound? Whatever, it's your subconscious. Right. So that thing goes all the time. Well, it can't talk to us. So what it does is when it's trying to analyze what's going on, when it feels something's not right, it starts letting us know. And the way it lets us know is by agitation, making us scared, making us nervous, the hypervigilance, that kind of what's going on, that stuff, that's all our subconscious trying to get us to like, hey, I don't know what's happening right now.
Yeah.
And eventually you have enough of that happen. It gets so bad. And it's so, because there's that agitation, that nervousness you get, it gives you that physical sensation, like where it's like, I don't feel good when you're nervous.
Yeah.
Well, when you have that 24 hours a day for years or weeks, months on end, that's what makes people want to eat a gun. One of those things. It just gets so overwhelming. So, yeah.
Yeah. So and one more thing on this, I know we were going to talk about the other thing, but this is a really good topic. The way it manifests in you and people in the military, and maybe even a lot of preppers, because we think about this, is it different than the way it would manifest in, say, in somebody that just lives in the city, works in an office building, that isn't trained like you've been trained, or that doesn't look at the things like, because would it be like PTSD make them just kind of go into their shell and hide from things and avoid things? Or is it all basically kind of the same brain response?
Well, it manifests itself in different ways, right? You have different ways that you try to deal with it. One of when it gets really bad, it gets to the point where you can hardly function, right? Everything it's so, because your brain is just on this vibration going on and this terrible feeling. So like trying to take a shower is a really big thing. And then you have all this stuff where it's trying to make you literally tries to make you not feel good. So you don't try to do anything, but it's the same across the board. And how I say this to people is, would you tell a person that was violently raped? Not that there's never like an easy rape, I guess, but someone that was violently raped and attacked and all this stuff. Would you tell them that like, oh, your PTSD isn't as bad as that person over there? No. So it affects everybody within parameters pretty much the same across the board. And yeah. I would say that in our society as adults, it gets back to what we always used to hear about, right? The midlife crisis. Oh, that person just folded, right? Their midlife crisis. No, they've been dealing with a bunch of crap their whole life, and it finally shut them down. Your brain, your subconscious is like, I don't know what's happening here. I'm shutting you down in order to protect you. Is kind of what it's thinking. And I'd say that most of us as preppers, we prep because some sort of experiences in our life, traumas. People get all wrapped around the axle about trauma, but why do we prep? Like, we don't want bad stuff to happen. We're trying to protect ourselves from bad stuff from happening. And I would say that that's why you have a lot of the people that aren't into prepping have no concept about it. Like, I don't know why you want to be prepped. Like, why would you think about that? Well, maybe they've never really had that aha moment that comes along and go, you know what? Like, I'm not ready if something bad happens. Yeah. I know. And I double checked this with, she was a double PhD with when I went to inpatient up in Utah, my therapist up there, I double checked this with her a while back, and it's 65+% of all public safety and military have some serious childhood trauma. 65%. So think about that. Yeah. And it's one of the reasons why a lot of people go into being cops and firemen in the military. Because by me going and being an Army Ranger, yeah, I learned a lot of really cool stuff, right? But what was I really able to do now? Protect myself better. But you say, I'm going out to protect other people. It's how our mind works it. And it's even crazier is if you got 65% of the people jumping into those fields because they got some sort of traumatic stuff that makes them want to protect themselves, they already have a level of trauma happening, and they're jumping in a field that's just going to throw more on top of it.
Yeah. Hey, Yardbird in the chat said, some people thrive on stress and some people just can't handle it very well. I think that's another level of, and I don't know that goes to the extent of PTSD. I think that's an everyday type thing. It depends on your personality, how you operate. Some people are good test takers. Some people aren't. Mm-hmm. I tend to do better when there's a little bit of stress. But when it really becomes like that thing we did with Kevin and the thing we did at North American Rescue, the class you put on with the trauma stuff, when it becomes that real big stress, that's why we practice, I suppose. That's why we pay attention to all the stuff we do as preppers, because when it does get to that situation, we can handle that pressure a little bit better. And I think that's probably why in the military, you do all that training before you even go out anywhere, because you got to be.
Yeah, it's all part of, when you think about a lot of that. And there are people that just don't deal well with stress, right? Like we've all seen them. They go, and remember, when they're not dealing well with stress, what they're having is they're having an autonomic or a central nervous system response, right? That's your fight or flight, your freeze. That's all that happening. So, I mean, they just go straight. If there's a bad situation happening, they go straight to lose their mind and act like a knucklehead. They've gone past anything that's productive to do because they're having that stress related central nervous system reaction. I think after a while, with the training and stuff, that gets into your situational awareness, right? What do? You have the OODA loop, right? Observe, orient, decide, and act. Well, when you go out and you observe a bunch of stuff and you orient yourself to it through training. You're like, okay, when this happens, I do this. And sometimes this happens and this happens. You're priming the pump to understand what's like to be able to work through your problems faster. When Boyd came up with the OODA loop, one of his things was you're trying to think through the problem faster than your opponent. And if your opponent hasn't trained and hasn't thought through all these different possibilities, and you have, you're probably going to work through it a lot faster. It's why people with experience and in things like that can walk in and I used to love it, right? You know, when paramedic for a long time or being overseas at times, you could walk in and make stuff happen like a symphony. It's just like you floated through it.
Yeah.
Just because you've done it so much, you've seen it. Everybody else that's really not locked up or having a trouble with it. It's the veteran cop, the veteran fire, the veteran at any job, the construction worker that can show up and everybody's like, what are we going to do? Oh, I think you just do this, this, and this, and everything works out. That's all observe, orient, decide, and act. That's someone who's they've primed their pump, they've gotten into their OODA loop, they've worked through it, and they're really good at handling it.
Yeah. Interesting. It's important, I think, to think about those different types of things. Like we always say, the odds of something becoming that large scale and that big, maybe, you know, a lot less than dealing with a natural disaster or something, but it's just important to think about. And we always do, how people are going to react in that situation. But that also goes for us as well. How we're going to handle a situation, our loved ones, the people around us and all that. So very interesting. Thanks, Yardbird, for the comment. Always makes my job easier when you throw a comment out that makes Brian talk for 10 minutes. So they don't have to figure stuff out here on my end. Very interesting though. We were going to go somewhere totally different with that, but that was a very good topic because I guess it doesn't even have to be some sort of large scale Mad Max type situation for all of this stuff to be relevant. It could be that smaller, you know, I even like the pandemic, something that is slow burning for a while, or the economy, the recession and stuff like that, stuff that's slow burning for a while. You know, you just got to understand how and why you're reacting some way or somebody else is reacting that way, and understand that, you know, that's why some people just cannot handle situations like that. They're just not built for it, I guess.
Well, they're not built for it. They've never experienced it. You know, I look at it and like when I see people that do that, it's like they're just in complete meltdown mode. And I'm like, wow, that must really suck right now. Like it must really stink to be you right now. And I just kind of go, okay, well, you know, we'll have to work on it. And I know Milo made a comment in there about treating PTSD. Hey, if anybody ever wants to talk about like how it works and stuff, you know, I'm not a therapist and all that. I just got last 5 years of going through treatment. So I didn't need a gun back in the day. By all means, reach out to me at Brian@mindforsurvival.com, the number 4 survival.com. And we'll set up time. We'll talk or exchange emails, whatever you want.
Yeah, absolutely. And over on our Survival Preppers YouTube channel, we did a video where you really went into the weeds with what causes PTSD. And really good video. You had a few slides and everything too, talking about the different parts of your brain. So if you want to check that out too, that's a very good video too. If you want to get literally heady into the whole situation. But yeah, it's definitely something I think that needs to be addressed a little bit more, and not, I guess it's kind of our faults too, because it is one of those things, especially in the military, where it's just tucked away. It's, you know, there's other things to worry about, so you don't talk about that stuff. And even some people, after everything's over, you still kind of keep it down because, you know, you're either not trying to be a burden on your family, or, you know, you just figure you can deal with it.
There's a shame. It's part of the shame drive. It's part of the whole process. It's, you know, again, it gets heady. Like, it's one of those things, when you really want to start going down the pathway on it, there's a lot of crunchy granola stuff involved, and you know it's all legit. At least from my experience, it's legit, and it can be kind of messy. I think part of the problem that we have is there's a lot of it happened really big in the 80s when the war on drugs got ramped up by Reagan. One of the things they did was they said, hey, we're going to help with mental health. Well, they pumped a bunch of money into the insurance industry, and it wasn't provide good quality mental health. It was just to say, you have a bunch of people who say they're psychiatrists or whatever that have a hospital. I have a buddy that he got busted with weed and they locked him up and he ended up doing 2 years in a mental institution. And when you're having a bad day in there, rather than work with you, they put him in a straitjacket that had a big ring on the back and they'd hang you on a wall in a room by yourself.
Yeah.
Right. So that's not the answer. Right. That just causes more trauma. So part of the problem is, and I have seen it, or my interpretation or impression of it is, part of the problem is the insurance industry doesn't get paid to fix you. And you have a bunch of gatekeepers in there that are basing the way they treat it. You know, we know that the meds don't work that well. Like extended meds over extended periods of time don't work. They need a lot more than that. And what happens? We hear the stories about the VA. Oh, you just go in there and they shove a bunch of meds down your throat, right? They don't do a bunch of treatment. I mean, Dakota Meyer talked about it. He was having like a time where he was really having a tough time with his PTSD, and he gets treated like a rock star. He's a Medal of Honor recipient. And he said, oh yeah, you can get back to me 2 weeks. I had a buddy who spent years in Afghanistan, and he was having a problem, and he went to the VA and he's like, I'm having some trouble back when, Biden did his whole, let's just drop the ball on Afghanistan and pull out. And so he contacted the VA and they're like, oh yeah, we can see you in 2 months. So what you have to go interact with people. You have to work through your stuff. And that's what they don't do. So part of the problem is we have this big mechanism set up that in a lot of cases isn't actually going to address the issue, isn't actually going to help people. They try to keep a lid on you and then they turn you loose. And it's unless you get in there and scrub it out, nothing's going to change. So part of the problem again is our insurance industry and the way we run after it. It's like just how that big pharma, the big everything is all about making money and not truly about making people better.
Yeah. Yeah. And one thing, how long did you go? You call it crazy camp. How long were you there? Was it a year? Was it 6 months?
No. It was 6 weeks, man. So
6 weeks.
Yeah. You go and what they do is they basically educate every day. Like I met with my therapist like once a week, but every day you sat in a big group. And part of it is getting used to being able to like tell your story and being able to open up, right? Because you just want to talk about OPSEC again. You get so used to shutting everything down. But what they teach you about is they teach you, and it's called Deer Hollow. If anybody you want to look into getting treatment, Deer Hollow Recovery in Draper, Utah is fantastic. And what they do is it's like a group classroom every day. You walk in, the chairs in your little circle, and they pull out a whiteboard and they start lecturing you about how the brain works. And then when you get to where they want to go in to dive in to explain something and show how it works, they pick somebody in the crowd like, hey, one of you, 10, 12, 14 people, 8 people, whoever's in there, let's talk about some of your stuff. And you go in there and you do that. And so it really educates you on how your brain works. And I don't know if it's cool, but the cool thing was with post-traumatic stress is it's a system. Our brain, there's a system of response and trauma that causes certain responses and the way we behave. Once you learn out that it's a system, the next thing you do is be Elon Musk and you can hack the system, start hacking it. So I went for 6 weeks because when I went up there, like I knew when I went, if I didn't like wrap myself in it and do great, when I came back, I was going to kill myself. There wasn't a doubt in my mind. So I'm like, I have to like go in and I got C's in high school. I needed to get an A in this thing. Yeah. And then you come back and you kind of feel good because you relax, you do yoga a couple times a week, you meditate, you go work out. So you're kind of relaxed, but then life comes back. Well, when you're in there, what they teach you is they give you a bunch of mental tools, cope ahead. It's what we do as prepping, right? It's part of the OODA loop thing. We look at what's coming down the road. We say, oh, this is how an EMP might happen. And you start thinking about what might happen. So if you're in the mall and the lights go out and you look down at your cell phone and you see your cell phone's dead and nothing on, you're going to be like, oh, we just got hit by an EMP probably. And you probably won't freak out. You're like, all right, how do I got to get home? First you might be like, damn, I got a remote control. I got to get in my trunk to get my bug out bag. And I don't have a real key anymore. How am I getting in my trunk of my car? Right. Yeah. So you'll be a lot more calm because you've coped up. So they give you a lot of these mechanisms, these tools to work through your stuff. But then you have to go home. And literally it took me 2-3 years after that of nonstop, just, I'm like starting to freak out here. What's going on? And then diving in and figuring out, going in and figuring out. It's like kind of training your brain. You literally rewire your brain after a while.
Yeah. And that's kind of why I think it's, even for, the preppers that haven't gone through PSD or don't have it.
Mm-hmm.
It's still something that you should kind of learn about. And it's, to
Sure.
me, my whole point with that was you going through that class. To me, it's kind of like if you working on a car, or me with different solar projects and stuff like that. If you understand how the thing works, you're going to be able to you're going to be able to figure it out a lot easier. So if you understand what's causing the car to knock here, or what's causing it to pull left or right, because you understand how the whole system works, you've got a better opportunity or better chance to kind of fix that problem or address it maybe before it becomes a huge problem. And I think that's kind of what you on a rudimentary level, what you went in there and
you learn how to identify it. It's like when something goes wrong with your car, right? Like, you may not know how to fix it, but you're like, I should probably go get this. I know something's wrong with it. Well, when you have mental problems, post-traumatic stress and stuff, when you know something's happening, it's like, oh, I should probably go get this taken care of, or I need to work on this. There's times even now where, I could go months without ever talking to my therapist, but then it's something I'll start going down a rabbit hole, or for a few days, it's something like I'm just feeling terrible. Like, hey, can I talk to you and work through stuff? And I think that's the big trick for preppers. When you go with what we're preparing for, bad things are going to happen. So being able to identify, like, before I understood that I had post-traumatic stress, I thought I was perfectly fine to drive through, when I was working in Northern Virginia and Washington, D.C., drive through the streets. And every time you get cut off all day there, people back down on ramps. When they get off on the wrong on ramp, they just put the car in reverse and back onto the freeway. It's nuts.
Yeah.
Right. And so I would go through traffic screaming and yelling, tearing my truck and my cab apart, going nuts. And I thought that was like, oh, I'm okay. Like, it's them. And what later on, it's like, I can get that under control. Because as soon as you get out of control, when that fight, flight, or freeze happens, when you're out of control, it's your central nervous system taking over and dictating at least a percentage of the action, and not you dictating all of the action. So it lets you recognize that, oh, you know what? I'm having a central nervous system response. How can I stop this right now in the moment? And how can I get re-engaged to say, all right, what do I have to do? It was one of the things when I first got into Facebook, prepper Facebook groups years and years ago. I remember the question came up, and this is before I knew I had post-traumatic stress, was someone said, well, what happens? You have your prepper group and someone starts having a really bad day, and they're not contributing, and you think they might be a danger. And like all these people in the group, I walk them out and put a bullet in your head. Well, just understand when the stress of the apocalypse is upon you, everybody's going to have a bad day. And if the answer is to put a bullet in the head, eventually you're going to have one or two people standing. Right. Yeah. It's, hey, I recognize you're having a bad day. Maybe you need a timeout. It was interesting. I think it was Band of Brothers talked about it. They did an episode when they're in the Battle of Bastogne, where the medic was talking about it. Like, it was kind of from the medic's perspective. And he said sometimes they would pull a person off the line, like literally 100 yards behind where the front line was. You're still on the line. When they start launching over mortars and artillery shells, you're still going to get blown up. But just having that little bit of space to relax often made people feel a lot better and got them back in the fighting shape. So understand, you're going to have bad days. Think about that. You know what? Okay, we're stuck in the house. The world's gone to heck. What are we going to do when someone has a bad day? How can we get with your kids? Try to make life at home normal as possible. Explain what's happening. Figure it out. But everybody's going to have a bad day in that stuff.
Yeah. And that's why that the importance of understanding how people react in different situations and paying attention to how our brains work. Like with a car, you hear it knocking or it's pulling, you kind of know, hey, there's an issue. Our brains do a great job of just kind of putting everything on the back burner, that subconscious stuff, and making it just doing the processes without us even knowing it. So we don't really pay attention a lot. But if you start to, I suppose if you start to pay attention to that stuff, it helps with OPSEC, all of those different things. And it can help you deal with, it kind of helps you, because I get kind of, I'll fly off the handle sometimes without thinking about why somebody's going or saying or doing the things that they're doing. But if I stop for a second and go and ask myself, okay, what is the issue here that I'm missing because I'm all pissed off now? And you can kind of address the whole situation changes when you treat it like that. And I think in an SHTF situation, the stakes are really high Right now, it's just me and Lisa getting in a fight.
You can't do a whole lot about how someone reacts in the moment. People are going to react how they're going to react. If you go down the rabbit hole of letting that screw with you, though, then now you and the other person are going down some rabbit hole rather than you just going, all right, they're having a moment. How can I help them work through it? Maybe it's the old slap somebody in the face and like, hey, get your stuff together.
Yeah.
And understanding, and again, it's a system. I had a friend a while back that lost a good friend, that ate a gun. And I would ask it, hey, how you doing? Well, I'm right here. And I'm saying, okay, and go look at the stages of grief. You can identify, you're going to work your way through all those. It's going to happen. So you can kind of go, okay, I'm here. I know why I'm acting like this today, because this is part of the process. And then you switch to the next stage of grief. Oh, this is where I'm at. I'm getting closer to being done with grieving. Like I'm being closer to being back to where I am. It's all a process.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because we all like to simplify, like you were talking about with if somebody's doing this or somebody's doing that, then I'm doing this. We all love to simplify all this stuff, but just this conversation right here and a lot of them that we've had just go to show that there's so many different variables and so many different things going on. And the SHTF event itself could be 50 different things that we just don't, I mean, you can't just say, I'm going to do this or I'm going to do that. You just never know until the situation starts to unfold and you go through it and then you find yourself in the moment.
Well, and it's one of the things I like to look at when I've defined capability as your mindset plus your ability plus luck, right? So when it comes to ability, what do you have? You have your actual skill, your knowledge, and your resources. That's where we buy all of our stuff. But if you have a bad mindset about something, your capability is diminished. So part of being a good prepper is to say, hey, my mindset is kind of crappy right now. How can I dial this? What do I need to do to reset myself so that I can have a better mindset so I'm more capable of doing this stuff? And we can go out and get all the preps we want in the world. If you don't have the knowledge to use them, well, then you're not going to be able to use it. But if you come up on that day and your mindset's not right, you've just decreased your ability or your capability to deal with the situation as well. Yeah. So I think understanding how we are acting in the moment and how we're acting in the day, if we're in a bad mood, okay, well, we're okay to be in a bad mood, but recognize it. So when something happens, go, okay, I'm in a bad mood right now. I should probably take a breath before I bite that person's head off.
Yeah. Yeah. It's all just, I mean, it's part of the whole thing. We can prepare as much as we can, but there's no real way to know what is going to get thrown at us. So it's just, it's like the t-shirt I've got over at the SHTF shop, little shameless plug there, but it's chance favors the prepared mind. I think that was like Louis L'Amour or somebody like that quote. But it's true. We create our own luck. And the more we kind of do with all of this, the more we pay attention to this stuff, the more we learn about all this stuff, the more, like with your PTSD stuff, go watch that video over at the Survival Preppers. The more you understand how that stuff works, the better understanding you have of the whole process. And if it does come to a situation like that, maybe it gives you just a little bit of a leg up. And that goes with everything.
See, I think preparedness, I don't know that we create luck, because don't forget, luck can be good or bad. Sometimes you're just going to have bad luck and there's nothing you can do about it. What I think preparedness does, it creates opportunity.
Yeah.
It creates the opportunity where you don't need to rely on luck. I mean, think about it right now. We talk about all the non-preppers that, a lot of people call them sheep that are walking around, whatever. If something bad happens, like Hurricane Katrina, right? There were a lot of people that had no idea how to prep. They had zero preps. They didn't leave their homes early, and they survived purely by luck. Right. And then there's those people who didn't have luck. Now, if any one of those people had been prepared, they probably would have much better chance to survive. Like, oh, hey, this hurricane's coming. It's going to whack us. It looks like they're telling us it's going to be a 5. Maybe I should get out of Dodge. Right. So I think preparedness actually creates increased opportunity to deal with situations and not have to rely on luck at all.
Yeah. Yeah. But with the opportunity, where we decide to put ourselves, it really is a big factor in whether that's going to be good luck or bad luck, whether we're going to have the opportunity to seize on the good luck, or whether we're not, which is going to create the bad luck. So yeah, I see what you're saying though, but it is about putting yourself in the right spot to seize on that opportunity when and if it does come. And people call that luck or whatever, but I think it's putting yourself in that position to be there when it does happen, rather than, you know, somewhere else when $1 million falls out of an airplane, something like that. So at any rate, we are going to get out of here tonight. I forgot to mention, everyone, we're going to be doing the after show right after this, and we're going to be talking about some of the biggest prepping challenges. I thought about this the other day about us, you know, us as preppers kind of being up there in that age range where we're starting to get a little bit older and things are changing and all that stuff. So I want to talk about that a little bit. If you are a member of the Bug Out location, you got that email. I sent that out earlier. Or you can go to the Bug Out location and log in and watch it, or it's an unlisted video over on our YouTube channel. But with that, unless you've got anything else, Brian, I think we're done here tonight.
No, I appreciate it, everybody. Thanks. Great chat tonight.
Yeah, very good. A lot of new people in there. A few that I didn't even recognize. A lot of new people. Very cool. Very good chat. I'll have to rewatch this and watch the whole thing. It's a little bit complicated with the whole Restream bot thing because you got to go through all the text in the beginning just to get to the comment. But very cool. Appreciate it, everyone. Everyone listening to the podcast, everyone over on Rumble, on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitter, everywhere. Well, maybe one person on Twitter. We don't get a lot of people on Twitter, but appreciate you all listening. Until next time, take care and prepare. We'll talk to you all later.